I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Hey, you've probably noticed this summer is getting hotter in Oregon and fires more extreme. That's forcing power companies here to do something that's common in California, but really rare here in Oregon and Washington. They're shutting off the power when conditions get dangerous so those lines don't blow down and spark a fire during a windy storm. Last night, we showed you how Portland General Electric is using artificial intelligence to detect fires when they're still small. Tonight, we'll look at what Pacific Power is doing to prevent their lines from sparking wildfires. That company has learned some very difficult lessons in recent years. A jury recently ordered them to pay tens of millions of dollars for their role in the 2020 Labor Day wildfires. Now, Pacific Power is gearing up for another hot summer. While they wouldn't talk to me about the lawsuit, they did show me their plans to forecast the next big dangerous storm. And that is our big story tonight. The summer of 2020 proved disastrous for thousands of Oregon homeowners and the electric company Pacific Power. The utility did not turn off its power lines in places like the Santiam Canyon as a dry, hot windstorm approached in September of that year. Some of their power lines were hit by branches or trees during the storm and sparked fires, in addition to the ones already burning. The resulting infernos damaged or destroyed 2,500 properties across the state. A lawsuit followed, and a jury recently awarded damages in the tens of millions of dollars for homeowners. But even before the fire and the lawsuit, meteorologist Steve Vanderberg said the company was talking to him about becoming their fire forecaster as they build up their expertise. Now he leads the fire team.
We are. In fact, we're prepared year-round. We're running models 365 days a year. We're doing analysis. We're looking at vegetation conditions. So yeah, we're prepared for fire season.
Vanderberg worked for the National Weather Service for 10 years, then for another electric company in San Diego for 10 years. Now he's in Portland at Pacific Power and spent the last year and a half building a massive database of historical fire information that can be turned into graphics. It holds 30 years of high-resolution weather and vegetation conditions across the entire western United States.
So it took supercomputers crunching round the clock 16 consecutive months to generate all this data. 10 million, what we call 10 million compute hours to generate all of this data. And now we're analyzing it. We're looking at how does that data inform what happens in terms of wildfire risk, in terms of different kinds of impacts on the grid, and we're using that to create products to keep us ahead of the weather.
Is the value of that you can look at one specific place on one date, but also see through history what's happened there?
Exactly. It's about understanding today's weather or tomorrow's weather in the context of the past 30 years.
Unlike Portland General Electric, Pacific Power does not have an array of cameras with artificial intelligence watching for telltale smoke that shows a fire has started. Instead, Vanderberg and his team rely on their databases, along with remote weather stations and workers in the field. They cover a vast territory, Oregon and 5 other states.
It's both a challenge but also an advantage, because when it comes to understanding how do you predict these things, the more data you have to work with, the better results you may get. The more you have to look at, right? So from a analysis standpoint and trying to understand how do all these conditions impact fire danger, it's an advantage to have a large service territory. But obviously forecasting on this scale can be challenging because the weather varies from canyon to canyon and mountain to mountain, and we have a lot of canyons and mountains in our service territory.
Yeah, much less state to state, Oregon to Wyoming or Utah.
Yeah, so 6 states, highly diverse, a lot of different weather and different challenges, but with the models we're running, we have a very high resolution look at those conditions hour by hour across all 6 states.
To get an idea how it all works, Vanderberg took us back to last year.
New tonight, thousands of Pacific Power customers are expected to face a power shutoff on Friday.
Remember this? It was big news September 7th of 2022. Conditions were ripe for trouble.
Still, it's going to be really windy enough that any fires that are out there or that start will get fanned and could exhibit extreme behavior very, very easily.
Vanderberg pulled up a map showing one danger area from back then, Sweet Home. It's southeast of Corvallis. The yellow lines here show the power grid.
Here we are on the night of the 8th. The green indicates light winds. We're pretty much seeing light winds across the area, right? And as we scroll forward in time, you'll notice that we start to see all these reds showing up along the Cascade Crest, and the yellows kind of spilling down the mountains.
Is red bad?
Red is winds over 50 miles per hour, and the yellows is anywhere from 30 to 50, depending on the shade of yellow there.
Okay.
And you can see as we go through the event how those winds shift and change over time. And you can see here, especially on the night of the 9th into the 10th, how those winds really start to try and channel down the west slopes of the Cascades. Right? And so that's where we're seeing, where the winds could impact our infrastructure.
And just so people know, this here's Sweet Home here.
Sweet Home.
Millersburg to the left a little.
Albany out here, and then there's Portland Metro. There's Mount Hood over here, and Hood River. And so, so you can see, okay, well, what does this mean? We know it's going to be windy. There are red flag warnings in effect. What does this mean? Well, these colors here, these yellows and reds, are indicating a heightened or an increased probability of outages. So now we have a map that shows us those power lines that are actually at an increased risk of having power outages from the wind, right? So now we're really able to hone in, okay, well, where is the potential impact here? And so this is looking at kind of a measure of how dry the vegetation is. And you can see it's all red everywhere, right?
Red's bad.
So what we're able to tell from this is, like, when we look at fuel moisture, every place was dry. But where is it that we're going to focus our actions, to target, to mitigate that risk? And it's where we see this overlapping with the outage risk, right?
And that is why Sweet Home's power was cut at 12:40 a.m. on September 9th, 2022. 2,400 people were left in the dark for 28 hours until the electricity flowed again.
Let's do this one.
Here's another tool they use: forecast projections of winds with an overlay of actual wind readings from weather stations.
This is the data we were pulling in at the time from Echo Mountain, which is just east of Lincoln City. And the black line represents the data we were getting from our weather stations every 10 minutes. And then the blue line represents a forecast of those conditions. And you can see we're monitoring that, and now it's in the yellow and it's approaching the red. And this is when we're expecting the potential for those increased impacts to our power lines from those winds. So this is an example of the data that we can pull in real time that gives us a look at, well, is it windier than forecast? Is it less windy? And how does that compare to what's normal for that location?
The graph showed that the forecast of dangerous winds was coming true. And so the power was also shut off for this area in September of 2022.
Based on both the forecast and also what the weather stations were telling us about the conditions at the time.
Vanderberg says the weather team's goal is to have most of the work done well before the storm hits. That allows time for the utility to put workers in place and warn the local community that the power may be shut off. That's why computer models like this are important. It shows how dry the grass is in the west in real time. This, for example, is Madras and Redmond. The weather team also runs fire simulations to see if something started today, what would happen in a specific area.
In this case, I happen to be looking at flame length, and here's a forecast going from Monday the 26th through Wednesday the 28th. And I can step through in time and we can see, how does that change, power line by power line.
There are other models like this one showing the fire potential index. This shows the greater Portland area. The biggest spike by far there, September of 2020, when the disastrous fires tore through the state. It's one more tool the Pacific Power will use this summer when deciding whether to turn off your power before a potential firestorm.
Because all of this data really takes the guesswork out of it. It's really important to know not just what the weather's going to do, but how that's going to impact the power lines. And what does that mean in terms of the probability of something bad happening? That's really important. And this is what these tools do. They don't just tell us what the forecast is and how windy and hot and dry it's going to be, or how dry the vegetation is going to be. It tells us what the potential probability of an outage is, the probability of an ignition occurring, and the potential consequences of that ignition should it become a wildfire.
Pacific Power says it's investing $470 million in fire mitigation over the next 5 years. It's a sad reality that things have changed so much here in Oregon. When I moved here back in 1990, hardly anyone had air conditioners for the summer because you didn't need one. Now the utilities report the highest electricity use is during the summer because most of us have something. I've been impressed to see how both Pacific Power and PGE have built up their weather teams. They're very serious about this. I hope they're not needed this summer, but I would not bet against it. And it seems likely that we will all live with more power shutoffs in the future. It's just our new reality. In the meantime, let us know what you think about this, will you? Send an email to thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. We love your feedback and input, and I look forward to hearing from you. We got all kinds of comments from you last night after our story going behind the scenes with a PGE meteorologist. We learned about their decision-making behind power shutoffs. Nancy wrote to us, I found the PGE meteorologist to be not only interesting, but reassuring. We also heard from a viewer named Patricia who was evacuated from her home during the 2020 fires. She said, wow, that piece was awesome. I'm so relieved to see an expert dedicated to turning it off when things get dicey. She appears extremely knowledgeable and caring. She clearly understands the life and death issues fire represents. I feel much better just knowing she's there to make these important decisions. We also got several viewers weighing in on the comments on the segment in KGW's YouTube channel. This person says, the planned blackouts last year for the first time in my life convinced us to go totally solar and unplug from the increasingly unstable grid. Increasing rates and great solar rebates helped quite a bit as well. If you missed our segment yesterday, head to the KGW YouTube channel and scroll down to The Story. You can watch our segments or full episodes right there, anytime you want.
Up next on The Story, Mayor Ted Wheeler released a proposal to criminalize open-air drug use in Portland last week.
This is a common sense approach. We must make it clear that people cannot use drugs in public spaces.
The proposal was set to go before the City Council tomorrow, but today the mayor pulled the plug, dropping the plan entirely. You're likely sitting at home wondering, why? Find out when The Story returns.
Let's talk about drugs on the streets of Portland. On Friday, Mayor Ted Wheeler released a plan to criminalize open-air drug use in the Rose City. His proposal carried punishments of a fine of up to $500, 6 months in jail, or both. Several of you liked that idea. Walter wrote in, I like the ban on daytime camping and the new proposed drug use in public ban. But how are they going to enforce it? It seems they can't get public defenders and have to let petty criminals go, and ticketing them just gives the material to start their campfires with. Well, we'll talk about that camping ban enforcement tomorrow, but when it comes to the public drug use idea, well, it turns out no enforcement needed. It's not going to be necessary because the mayor has backed off and no such ordinance now is going to be introduced to the City Council tomorrow. Yes, you did hear that right. It was going to happen, but now it's not. The mayor backtracked. Just last week, he announced this plan to combat open drug use, released a canned video statement, and refused to give interviews after the announcement, and then stuns us today with an about-face 4 days later. The mayor sent a statement today with his reasoning as to why and what he thinks will prompt meaningful change on Portland streets. He says that he first got the idea for his proposal during the GOP walkout in Salem because a bill criminalizing some fentanyl possession was being held up in the Senate. But this weekend, a surprise. The state bill targeting fentanyl actually did pass the House and Senate just before the end of the session. It currently sits on the governor's desk. Wheeler says after talking with Portland police and the city attorney, they believe that House Bill 2645 addresses their primary concerns about drug use, that it gives police a tool that Wheeler would have handed them with his own ordinance. So that's why he says he's backing off and not introducing his plan. But does the bill do exactly what the mayor's plan would have done? The short answer is no. Let's explain. The mayor says the bill makes possession of fentanyl a misdemeanor, which is true, but it's only certain amounts of fentanyl. And the bill says nothing about open-air drug use, which is what his plan targeted. Here's what it will do. Anyone found with 1 gram or more or 5 individual doses of fentanyl can be charged with a Class A misdemeanor. The penalties that kind of charge carries are up to 364 days in jail, a fine of just over $6,000, or both. Advocates say the bill will take fentanyl dealers off the streets. And they believe the law is needed because right now Oregon law does not have a Class A misdemeanor charge for possession of fentanyl as it does for other drugs like heroin, meth, and cocaine. And the bill includes an emergency clause that will put it into effect the moment Governor Kotek signs it. So, yes, it's very likely there will be a statewide law criminalizing possession of fentanyl, but only in certain amounts. In theory, if someone's using on the street, police could talk to them, but if they have less than a gram or 5 doses of fentanyl, the only consequence would be a Measure 110 citation, which, as we have explained many times before on this show, does little to nothing. So, here's my opinion on all this. The mayor must really have a sore back from bending over so far backwards trying to explain this flip-flop. Of all the things that Ted Wheeler has suggested recently, this ordinance making it illegal to use drugs in public like it's illegal now to drink alcohol in public, well, it's one of the few things that drew lots of support from you viewers. Why? Because it made sense, and it suggested our city was on the verge of returning to some common sense. But now we're back to square one. You know, summer is a time for visitors. If you have folks from out of town, why don't you try to explain to them why it's not legal to drink a beer or some wine on the public sidewalk, but it is okay to shoot up heroin there. And I'm not kidding. That really is the law. And when they stop laughing, think about that message and what it says to everyone. Today, the mayor said that he knew his drug plan was kind of risky and that someone maybe would probably sue to block it, but that he would have gone ahead and proposed it anyway. You know what? That's what leaders do. They set expectations and then they follow through. Let the courts decide what's legal or not. But in the meantime, you are telling the public this is not acceptable. It's not going to fly in my city. In fact, it's going to stop. The fact that the mayor bailed on what even he called a common sense move, well, that speaks loudly about his leadership in this instance, or his lack thereof. That's my opinion anyway. You don't have to agree with me, but I hope it makes you think about this. And by the way, while you're thinking, send me an email. Let me know what you think about this. Did the mayor make the right call and I'm just full of hot air? It's possible. Or is it just the opposite? Or maybe something else. Our email address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. I do look forward to hearing from you. Coming up next on The Story, it's a section of Portland's Old Town known as The Pit, a refuge for homeless people under the steel bridge that is not often cleared by city crews. And now a county-led project that hopes to house 300 people has outreach workers in the pit to get people some help. Have their efforts been working? We'll take a look when The Story returns. As the city of Portland prepares to implement a daytime camping ban later the next month, there's still a lot of educating that needs to happen to make sure that people on the street even know it's coming. At the same time, the struggle to get folks on the path toward permanent housing continues. Outreach workers are now focused on a section of Old Town known as The Pit. It's part of a county-led program to get 300 people off the streets in the span of 1 year. Is it working? Blair Best has a progress report.
This slice of land in Old Town is often ignored. Under the steel bridge, surrounded by train tracks, and nestled behind city and state transportation headquarters, it's a refuge for homeless people like Tony Hunter.
Honestly, right here is peaceful, yeah. It's not too much drama down here.
Known as the Pit, this encampment is rarely swept by the city. One of the reasons outreach workers from transition projects are now targeting it.
What you're seeing right now is us delivering cell phones.
William Casting is the project manager for Housing Multnomah Now, a Multnomah County-led program aimed at getting 300 people off the streets in 12 months.
The goal is steep, but I do think it is achievable.
They helped Tony submit a housing application last week.
It's actually amazing. I'm still waiting, so she told me she'll come out tomorrow to talk to me and let me know.
All it takes is a few good people to help you, lift you up.
They also helped this man get off the streets this month. He lived in the Pit for years.
Yeah, I love Portland because they love me, that's why.
Good morning, outreach.
If they didn't really want to help you, or it was just like a thing that only for people from Portland, then I would have never been saved.
The meat and potatoes of this process is developing that relationship, identifying their barriers to housing, and then working through those barriers.
This outreach comes at a time when the city of Portland is cracking down on rules around homeless camping. Next week, a ban on daytime camping starts to go into effect. So the people living out here see this outreach as a saving grace.
It's perfect. It's right on time.
Though the outreach workers are bracing for the approaching ban.
Our concern with the daytime camping ban is that we will lose track of a lot of the individuals we've worked so hard to find.
They've outreached to 140 homeless people in the pit. They're submitting housing applications for 14 of them.
It's so few because it takes a lot of people to actually house and work with individuals.
Do you guys have enough staff to realistically house 300 people in 12 months?
So it's important to remember that this is a pilot project.
Growing pains aside, it's a project that's changing the morale of the site by giving people hope, one tent at a time.
And if you uplift each other all the time, then I feel like we can bring back Portland the way it used to be.
Outreach will continue here in Old Town until June 30th, and they're still figuring out where they'll target next. In Northwest Portland, Blair Best, KGW News.
Thanks, Blair. Great to see that happening, although only 10% want housing. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. But remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. Stick around now for the news at 6:30. I'll see you right back here tomorrow.